Aloha, everybody, and welcome back to the second part of our Faith, Family, and Freedom Triple F podcast. I'm your host, Eva Andrade, and I'm here still with Jim Hochberg.
We've been
Jim,
sitting here for a week.
we've been sitting here for a full
Same
week
shirt,
waiting for
everything.
this. I know we haven't moved. We have. They're going to start charging us rent.
Ooh.
So last week, what we talked about is we talked about the differences between a 501c3 and 501c4.
Organization, correct.
And now we're going to talk about what happens when they're in office and how a bill becomes law. So basically the legislative process.
And when you see this and you say, wow, I wish I've known that before, ask yourself, does my pastor know this stuff, or should I ask the pastor to invite Hochberg and Andrade to come and do a presentation like this to the church? Because we do it for free and we love it.
So let's chat about that. Very long intro. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I
Okay.
get excited.
Well, you know what I appreciate about you the most, Jim?
I have no idea.
Well, this is going to be for posterity's sake, right? So we can look back on this, is that you definitely keep me on my toes. You realize that, right? For all the years we have worked together. And we like to remind you that one of the things that Jim and I bring to the show, which is why we are doing this, is that we've worked together for over 20 years here in the state of Hawai'i. So we know some of the ins and outs. We're not perfect. I don't know everything. I know Jim thinks he knows everything.
No, I don't.
Oh, he admitted that. Mark that, time code that, peeps. We're going to come back to that. No. All right.
I'll say it again. I don't know everything.
So
I'll say it again.
how we ended the show last week is we talked about, okay, so if you don't like someone, then you can vote them out of office.
Which you should do.
Right. Okay. So, but let's talk about what happens, because as we talked about several shows ago, we talked about voting in Hawaii, that people tend to stay in office forever and ever. Amen.
In Hawaii, they do.
Yes. And then if they do leave office, they just go to another office.
A higher office or
So,
something.
I mean, we can look at Tulsi Gabbard as an
Yeah.
example for that, right? She was in the state house and then she became a congresswoman. Or you can even look at Josh Green. That's a great example because he started in the House of Representatives, then he went to the Senate, and then he became lieutenant governor. And now he's put his hat in the ring to run for governor. So that's kind of what happens here in Hawaii. We've got the same people. They do that infamous
Correct.
circle. So let's talk about, first of all, laws. So laws in Hawaii come from the Hawaii Revised Statutes, right?
Well, that's where they're maintained.
That's where they're maintained. So after everything's said and done and something goes onto the books as law, then it becomes part of this huge, what is it now, like a 20-book?
It's actually electronic.
Well,
I don't
you
know
can
how
do it
many
electronic.
books. We
Oh,
don't use books anymore.
Do you know? Okay, so this is going to date us, all right? But when I first started working in this, we actually had to have the actual books.
And I think there were like 12.
There were, and then
volumes.
every time the session would come up and they'd pass new laws or they'd rescind laws or they'd change laws, they'd have to give these supplements. So then you'd have to buy all the supplements. And boy, I'll tell you what, I had a whole shelf of that. It actually made me feel like I was an attorney. I'm not an attorney, but I felt like I was because I'd have all these like real important books in my
Was
office.
that Father Mark telling you had to have those books?
No, it was that I had to look them up because of the legislation.
Interesting.
This was back in the days when anything that happened at the state capitol would be done on paper, and you would have to go to the Hawaii state capitol and you would have to pick up these boxes of paper, and thousands of bills are introduced every year. And actually, that's a good place to start because all legislation in the state of Hawaii normally starts with an idea.
Well, can we put it in this context? It just hit me.
Yes.
So in December, you do your Christmas shopping. Maybe you have an Advent season. You have Christmas, which is lovely.
You have Kwanzaa.
You celebrate New Year's. And then it's January. And then the legislature.
Well,
Okay.
that's how we feel because
That's the way it
while
is.
everyone else is enjoying their Christmas, I'm like, oh gosh, the legislative session's going to start in a couple weeks and I'm already stressed about it. But okay, so What happens is all legislation normally starts with an idea, and that idea could be it could be something that's not on the books yet, or like maybe somebody's having some traffic problems, or maybe I will tell you there was actually a bill when I first started. I remember it had something to do. The title of the bill was relating to ashtrays. So that should give you an idea that somebody somewhere thought that they need to outlaw ashtrays. This was back in the smoking days, and maybe somebody was offended by these. But so basically, what happens is you, as a constituent, you notice that something's happening in your locality that you think needs to be changed. Maybe the police department has too much power, you think, or maybe they don't have enough, or whatever the case is. Normally, what happens is you will go and see your legislator, so your representative or your senator, and you will bring this idea to them.
So more likely than something kind of general like that is somebody will live on a street that doesn't have very good paving and they're sick and tired of their car hitting all the potholes. So they call their legislator and say, we got to fix my street. And so when the legislature is spending money, because all of the money that the state is allowed to spend has to come out of the legislature passing a law to spend the money. So for most people, I think it would be something like that, where they call and the guy says, okay, we'll put your street in the money budget thing.
I would say
Okay.
that you're correct, that's the biggest. But the reason I bring up the idea of the ashtray is because the people that talk to us, our people, the faith-based people, they're normally the ones that come up with these outside of the box things. And they'll say, can we have a law that says this or says that? And so basically that's how it would start. You would go to your legislator and you would sit down with them and you'd basically tell them, what it is you're trying to accomplish. Now, legislators at that point, they can say, that's a great idea. I want to get behind this. And their office would draft the bill. I have seen people provide language to the legislature that they've gotten maybe off the internet, or they've worked with other states or whatever. So I've seen that happen too, where they give suggested language. And then the legislator at that time, they have staff that can clean it up. That can
And a legislator is the person that got elected as the member of the House or a member of the Senate.
Right. And so they will normally have a member of their staff that will clean it up and present it in the form that it needs to be in order for it to be introduced.
So let's give everybody a suggested change for this coming January. I think you all should call your legislators and say, we've had enough of this COVID mandate business. How about passing a law that says no more COVID mandates? See, everybody can call, and then all the legislators will know how much we hate this.
And that's a good point to make, because what might happen is your legislator might not need to draft this bill because, say, Jim, who is your representative?
Hashem.
Okay, so his representative, his Hashem, mine is Representative Val Okimoto. So if I go to Representative Okimoto and I say to her, I've got this idea, we should be doing this, she might know that Representative Hashem is already introducing a bill. And in that case, she would co-sponsor the bill with him. So it's always good to go to your legislator, because your legislator is going to, especially if they think it's a great idea, they're going to be talking to other legislators to find out, where they are in this. And the reason they do that is this is, in my opinion, it's almost like an early polling. They want to know how that bill's going to do. If the bill gets introduced, they want to know right away whether other people are going to, vote against it. And I will tell you that this is what happens on all pro-life bills here in the state of Hawaii. What normally will happen is you'll find a good senator or a good representative who will introduce a pro-life bill, and they will do their internal polling, and they'll find out it's almost dead on arrival. Which is why a lot of times, Jim and I, we get heartbroken when people in the community come to us and go, why aren't you guys, introducing some good pro-life bills? We'd love to have some pro-life bills move through the legislature, but the makeup of the legislature, and I started the show last week saying there were 51 legislators,
House members,
and 4 of them are Republicans.
But there are pro-life Democrats too.
Well, I did an internal just from my own based on how they vote. And I will tell you that in the Senate, out of 25 members, we have 2 members that are strongly pro-life, sometimes 3. Okay. In the House, there are 51 members. 4 Republicans, and there's about 8 members that we would say are strongly pro-life.
But we had a Republican in the House for a very long time that was pro-abortion. So you can't go by the
R,
designation of the R and the
you
D.
cannot in Hawaii because Governor Linda Lingo in 2006 signed a Freedom of Choice Act for
Correct.
abortion. And so basically what that does is, and you got to watch our show where we talk about abortion, because basically what that means is if Roe versus Wade is overturned, Hawaii will still have legalized abortion on demand. So it's really important that regardless of whether your legislator is a Democrat or Republican, you got to know where they stand. So building your relationship with your legislator should even be before you go in and ask them to introduce
That's
a bill.
true.
But anyway, so
Well, that's, can I add at that point? Because you also need to build your relationship with Miss Andrade here. Because as she mentioned back in the day when you got stacks and stacks and stacks of paper that had bills that were thousands of bills, there are still thousands of bills. And the process is like hide and seek. Somebody has to go through all those bills to figure out which ones matter. And out of the ones that matter, which ones are likely to actually go through the process more or less. And she's the one that does it. I don't have to do it, and you don't have to do it. And I would strongly recommend you take advantage of her editorial oversight on that process, because it's, I used to do it, and I'm really glad I don't have to anymore because it's very tedious.
it's very tedious. And I know that sometimes some of you in the community have trained yourself and you do it too. And it always breaks my heart when people in the community call me and they go, well, why aren't you tracking this bill?
And it's because it has no chance of
It
doing
has
anything.
no chance of doing anything. And then they send out notices to people saying, call your senator and ask them to hear this bill. So I got to be honest that I have mixed feelings about that, because on one hand, you want people to get plugged in. You want people to be involved in the process. And so you want them to be able to contact their senator or the representative and say, hear this bill. But what happens is, especially the faith-based community here in Hawaii, they get beat up all the time by their involvement. They feel like that they do all this, they do all this, they do all this, and there's no change. And so unfortunately, for us to start making a difference here in the state of Hawaii, we got to sometimes take baby steps. And the legislative process, as you mentioned, it's so tedious to look through all the bills that we want to be able to get involved in the bills we know are going to move, because that's going to require a lot of time.
And unfortunately,
So
that means we don't get to support very many, because most of the ones that move are not good for our values.
And keep in mind that after a bill is introduced, what happens is it's assigned a number, and then it's assigned to committees based on the content. So if the bill is about, like abortion, for instance, it's going to go to the health committee.
Correct. And it'll go to the
judiciary committee. And you can look by the makeup of the members on this committee. We are dead on arrival on most of these bills. You have to build up a relationship with the legislature so that when you go to testify, they at least look at you like they're at least listening to what you have to say. They may not accept it, but if they think you're crazy, you will have absolutely no chance of making impact. And I know that's frustrating. I'm speaking to you guys that are out there all the time, and you go there and you feel like they're not listening to you. It doesn't serve our purpose if you're threatening these legislators with the Bible and that they're going to hell, because it may be true, but we have to keep the main thing. And the main thing is getting involved at the legislature the right way.
Correct.
And so as frustrating as this, I hear you. My heart is there with you.
So like everybody that does ministry at church, you know this 80-20 formula. 20% of the people do 80% of the work in church. Well, it's even worse than that with the public working with us at the legislature. I would say it's probably 0.001% of the people in our values scenario that work with us, which means a lot of you aren't, and you should.
Yes.
And if you vote your values and change the people that are sitting in those chairs in the legislative offices to be people that share your values, then we could actually get some good pro-life, pro-family, pro-parent legislation passed.
Absolutely. That's a very important comment. So, okay, so the bill has now been assigned to committees based on whatever the content is. And now the process for the bill is it's either going to move or it's not going to move.
And by move, you mean proceed from one committee to
scheduled
the
for
next.
hearing. It means that it's actually going to
Right.
get scheduled for
Because
hearing.
it has to go through 3 hearings in both of the houses. So it has to have 6 hearings in order to pass. And that's a process that can end along the road anytime it doesn't get the votes necessary to go forward.
Right. So one of the questions I get a lot is, okay, so once a bill is assigned, like let's just say it's a bill on abortion, and the first committee is the health committee. A lot of times the calls I'll get from people is, let's say it's an abortion bill, but it's a pro-life abortion bill. So maybe it's going to penalize Planned Parenthood and make them have to pay a tax, whatever, for every abortion they do. Then what'll happen is people will call me and they'll go, well, shouldn't we be calling all the members of the health committee and tell them to hear the bill? The answer to that is it's yes and it's no.
Well, there's no reason not to make that call. That call's okay, even if it doesn't take that long. It might be a waste of time.
Well, it depends on who, and this is why I said it's yes and no. Depending on who the chair of that committee is. In the Senate, the chair of that committee is Senator Roz Baker. So you could have 20,000 people call Senator Roz Baker and tell her, hear this bill.
But I would still do that because I would still call her and say, you know, I'm a Christian, I'm pro-life, I pray for you all the time. I really would like this bill to get a hearing so that we get to present information, we get to hear the other side, they get to hear us, because that's a ministry activity. So I would like you to hear the bill. She's still not going to do it, but at least I got to tell her that.
The caveat for that is, and I want this on the record, that if you're going to do that because you feel you're called to do that, then please, please, please do it with respect. Do
Always.
not call her office and make threats. And I know that it happens because we have people we know that work in the various offices, and I don't want to get the report that people are being threatened because I'm not okay with that.
Well, we should never be like that.
But again,
I mean, we shouldn't do that with our kids' teachers. We shouldn't do it with police officers. We shouldn't do it with anybody.
But having said that, Jim and I understand your frustration. So
Yes.
again, you know, we're not trying to dismiss that you don't have a reason to be frustrated. Trust me, Jim and I are there at the Capitol. We know what it's like to get beat up and be frustrated.
And
So
we know
get
the
it.
other 20 people that help.
Yeah. Yes.
Where's the rest of you?
Okay. So as the bill, the bill gets heard in its committee, and in that committee, most of the time is when they're going to discuss the content of the bill. It could change. The bill could go from a good bill to a bad bill based on the changes. It could go from a bad bill to a good bill based on the changes.
The purpose of having the hearing in the Committee on Health is for the people that understand the substantive law of the health area to read the words and see if they make sense in the context of the health area. And if they need to change things, they make amendments, and then it goes to the next committee that has a different substantive expertise, and they look at it from that perspective, and they may amend it too. It could also be amended for political reasons,
Right.
separate from the substance. And then, yeah, that happens too.
And there's technical things that you have to understand about that too. Sometimes they'll put a defective date on it, which means it's not going to take effect till 2056 or something like
But
that.
they do that on purpose.
Yeah. So
because it can't pass
so
without
please
fixing
don't,
that.
you know, when you're getting ready to write your testimony, you have to understand these little things, because I've seen people in their testimony go, this bill is bad because it doesn't take effect till 2056 or whatever. The other thing is there's a way to read the bill, and Jim and I do workshops on this. So please contact us, because
If
we'll
you want
actually
to know what the Rams Air format is, have us come do a workshop.
Yes, because we'll actually walk, because there is a way to read the bill to know what they're changing, because that's the other thing. I've seen people submit testimony about
Really
stuff that's
upset
already in the law.
That's
you
in
know?
the bill because it's part of the paragraph
Yeah.
that they're making the change.
Yeah.
It's been that way for 20 years.
Yeah, and so it's hard to do that. So anyway, so the bill will make its way through, and then what will end up happening is once the full chamber, whether it's the Senate or House, votes on it and passes it, then it goes over to the other chamber, and then the process begins again.
And
The number stays the same, but then it gets assigned to new committees. And
but there's a deadline halfway through the 3-month that if it doesn't make it to the other side by that crossover date, it's dead until the next year if
Right.
it's the first half of the 2-year
because we're on a
thing.
biennial session. So basically a bill could be introduced this year and not happen, and then actually it could
But
move
it's
in
still
the
alive
second
for
year.
the
It's
next
still
year.
so,
Right.
and that's what Jim was saying, is it's one of the things I do is I track all this stuff. So you don't have to,
Yeah.
as you mentioned. So okay, so
So
let's
if you want to get into her program, you go to hawaiifamilyforum.org and you sign up. What's the
and they're just right on the front page. It says sign up to receive, and
Yeah.
then we'll send you out notices. So okay, so let's just assume that a bill has now been heard by all its committees. It's moved over to the other chamber. It's moved through those committees. Now, one of two things is going to happen if there's been a lot of changes to the bill. If the so say it started in the House and it got to the Senate, and the Senate made changes to it, it is now a different bill than what the House members voted on. So
So
what
don't send the same testimony you sent in the other house because the bill may not be
it
the
may
same.
not be the same.
You need to read it again to see what's going down.
Yes. So let's assume that the Senate made changes on a House bill. Now, what will happen is the Senate will go to the House and they'll basically show them the new version. They'll look at it, and the House could agree to the Senate's changes.
Correct.
They could. And if that happens, then the bill would just go, it would be voted on and passed, and the Senate would just go straight to the governor because the House will agree to the Senate changes. What happens more than not is that the House will disagree with the changes, and then
Because
the bill
Senate changed the version that they
that
passed
they
over,
passed.
and they probably don't like changing
Yep,
their
yep.
thing.
So what will happen in that case is the bill will end up in a conference committee. Couple of things to understand about conference committee is, number one, you cannot sit on the conference committee, which is members of both chambers, so Senate and House. You cannot even sit
both parties.
both parties, and you cannot sit on the committee unless you voted for the bill. So sometimes legislators will vote yes with reservations on a bill, not because they like it, but because they want the opportunity to be appointed to the conference committee. And if they vote no, so that's another thing we have a hard time explaining to people is we have good legislators sometimes that will vote yes with reservations because they want to stay part of the discussion. And that cannot happen if they vote no outright. But some will,
Well, and if
depending on
we
the
had
principle of the bill.
a 50-50 split in the Hawaii legislature like there is currently in the Senate of the United States, and 50% stuck together voting no, we wouldn't need a conference because it wouldn't go through.
Now, the conference.
We don't have that in Hawaii right
we
now.
don't have that.
Not even close.
But one of the shenanigans that does happen in the conference committee is where the infamous gut and replace,
Which has come to an end.
which has come to
Very
an end.
recently. But
But-
explain gut and
But
replace.
so what could happen? So in that scenario that we talked about, a bill could have started off as a bill relating to ashtrays. And so the title, let's say the title of the bill was relating to health, because that was the caveat, is that the content had to at least match the title.
That's in the
And so-
Constitution.
Yeah. So what would happen is they'll have these generic titles like relating to health. And that could mean anything, right?
Well, no,
So,
it doesn't mean guns. It means health.
okay. So, but here's the thing. So let's say the bill was relating to health and it was about ashtrays. And so it went through the House as an ashtray bill. And then it moved to the Senate, and the Senate, they changed it from ashtrays to smoke
Health
alarms,
insurance.
smoke alarms, or something
I mean,
like that.
it doesn't have to have
it
to
could
do
be
with smoking.
anything.
It could be health
Anything.
insurance,
Anything.
anything health-wise.
Yes.
Crosswalks.
Yeah. And so now, of course, the House is going to disagree to the Senate changes because, this
They
is,
put all that work into doing the ashtrays.
But now it goes to the conference committee, and they're like, you know what? We didn't get that bill passed. We wanted on veterinarians being able to do something. So they gut the entire bill and they make the whole bill about veterinarians. And then what happens is the bill, because it's totally changed, now it has to go back to both chambers. So it'll go back to the House, and
now
it'll go
it
back to
does.
the Senate, and they all vote for it. No more public input because there is no public input in conference committee. Once it gets to conference committee,
You can watch. We've gone to it's still a public conference. You can still go and watch.
but it's a joke.
But they don't take testimony.
No, and you don't know what they're doing. They
And they
basically
waste a
will
ton
just,
of time.
yeah,
It's all
just-
behind the scenes.
But anyway, so what would happen is this bill passes, then it goes to the governor for signature. He signs the bill into law, and you're like, what the heck just happened? Because you have testified on both sides on bill that is now not even the bill to become law. But now with the court case, that cannot happen anymore.
The League of Women Voters filed a lawsuit in 2018 over this quote unquote gut and replace process, which, by the way, the legislature's been doing here, I think, Well, for sure, for decades, but probably since statehood. But anyway, they filed a lawsuit challenging gut and replace because the state constitution says for a bill to become law, it must be heard 3 times in each house. And they were challenging whether a completely new bill from the gut and the replace got heard anywhere because there was no hearing on it. And the Hawaii Supreme Court ruled just recently that gut and replace violates that 3 hearings in each house rule, and you can't do it anymore, which I say, hallelujah.
Which is good. So what that means now is by the time the bill gets through conference committee, it'll move to the governor. He can either sign it into law, he can veto it. If he's going to veto, he's got to let the legislature know that he's going to veto. Or he could let it become law without his signature.
And
then
if he vetoes it, the legislature can
they can
override his veto by a supermajority vote, which is the calculation the governor's office does before he announces the veto.
And that goes to what we talked about at the very beginning of the show today, is that even the governor is going to go around and talk to legislators to know what their pulse is on a particular bill. Just like when you go to your legislator and ask them to introduce a bill, there's a pulse being taken. Jim and I have worked there long enough. We kind of have a pulse knowing how a legislator is going to do. So that's why you need to stay plugged in with us. That's why you need to go to hawaiifamilyforum.org and you've got to sign up so you know what's going on. You've got to continue to watch these shows because Jim and I are going to continue to tell you what's happening. This is going to be the inside baseball. So you want to stay plugged into us. You want to partner with us to make this happen. We can't do this show without you. You sitting there knitting right now, or you reading the paper or eating your donut or whatever it is. Yeah, we need you. We're talking to you. We need you. Partner with us. Send me an email at info@hawaiifamilyforum.org. Ask me how you can partner with us, or just go to hawaiifamilyforum.org and donate, and we can continue this show because that's important to us. Like this video, share it with your friends, hit that subscribe button. And of course, I watch people say, tickle the notification button so that you'll always know when a new video is being uploaded. Comment, comment, comment. And we will see you, brothers and sisters, next week. Mahalo for joining us today.
See you then.